Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
We have three major factors all in hand that is just causing a widespread, deficiency in formula.
Navigating the baby formula shortage.
If I were to be governor coming up after this, I would be a little bit worried about what the court is saying.
What a Supreme Court ruling could mean down the road.
Clearly, this is a very physical representation of how much demand there is.
New wave of recycling hits Louisiana.
This larger-than-life role that she had was completely unknown before the discovery of the tomb and the narratives that were included in the tomb.
History and culture at our doorstep. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. Kara is off tonight. At the Capitol, lawmakers gave final approval to the state's $39 billion budget, with big money being spent to help with one-time investments for highways, bridges, higher education, teacher pay raises, and more. Money was allocated for a new bridge in Lake Charles, in Baton Rouge, and to finish I-49 from Lafayette to New Orleans. Now, this vote comes 2 weeks before session adjourns, which would give legislators time to override any vetoes the governor might make. And now some of the other top headlines of the week. The cost to fill up your tank in Louisiana hit an all-time high this week, with the average price for a gallon of gas at $4.19. The average for a gallon of diesel is up to $5.21 in our state, and that is, of course, driving up what we pay for food and retail items. A bill to keep transgender women and girls in the state from competing on college and K-12 women's and girls' athletic teams was approved by the House, moving it closer to the desk of the governor. He vetoed similar legislation last year. The governor has agreed to remove the COVID-19 vaccine from the list of shots students are required to get to enroll in state schools. The state health department continues to strongly recommend the vaccine per CDC recommendations, but acknowledges that the vaccine had not yet received full U.S. Food and Drug Administration approval for those under the age of 16. We're seeing a recent increase in COVID-19 in East Baton Rouge Parish wastewater, in addition to increased cases, percent positivity, and hospital emergency visits for COVID-like symptoms. Mayor Sharon Weston Broom says the parish is monitoring the data and says it's a good time for people to get vaccinated or boosted if eligible. Saturday, May 21st, a father-son duo will graduate from the LSU E.J. Urso College of Business. Brian Stokes will receive his Master of Business Administration, while his son George will receive his bachelor's degree in marketing. Brian originally attended LSU in 1983 for his undergraduate studies, then left to join the U.S. Army. Big congrats to both of you. With a dire shortage of baby formula has come several DIY recipes floating around the internet. But a warning, some could be dangerous for newborns. Kara St. Cyr talked with Dr. Stephanie Coleman Lawrence, who practices family medicine at Baton Rouge General Hospital.
You've likely seen these images on a loop for the past week. Shelves and grocery baskets empty, missing baby formula. Dr. Stephanie Coleman Lawrence with Baton Rouge General Hospital says there's no one cause.
So we have three major factors all in hand that it's just causing a widespread deficiency in formula.
Over 40% of baby formula is out of stock nationwide. The shortage is fueled primarily by supply chain issues, inflation, and a major formula manufacturer recalling contaminated products. The Biden administration is working with retailers and manufacturers to find a solution.
With regard to the issue of formula, we've done three things.
The Biden administration relaxed the Women and Infant Program requirements, allowing more access for mothers buying formula. Secondly, the FDA is working with manufacturers overseas to import more product from other countries. And lastly, the White House set up an online database with resources to find the retailers and nonprofits who have it.
This is a process. We're working on it very, very hard. There's nothing more urgent we're working on than that right now, and I think we're going to be making some significant progress very shortly.
But while the White House finds a bureaucratic solution, moms at home may be looking for a more hands-on fix, like making baby formula out of evaporated milk or syrups. But Coleman Lawrence says DIY baby formula isn't the best idea.
You see all these recipes of people, back from the 60s and the 50s where you just mix some Caro syrup with some evaporated milk and there's some baby formula. That's not going to meet your baby's needs, and it can actually cause some very dangerous deficiencies in vitamins, minerals. It can cause very dangerous dehydration that has actually led to hospitalization in many children.
Baby formula is modeled after breast milk, which means it has key ingredients like iron and proteins necessary for the baby's diet in the earliest months of life. Without it, babies can suffer from malnutrition and lower brain function in the future. Plus, there isn't a guarantee that the products are sterile if moms opt to make a formula from scratch. Coleman Lawrence says there are other options you can use before attempting to make formula yourself.
If you are unable to get access to breast milk or formula for your baby, for children who are 6 months and up, the American Academy of Pediatrics recently said it's okay to give children 6 months and older cow's milk, whole cow's milk, up to 24 ounces in a day, along with solid foods to help take the place of that formula. Now, if you are able to get formula, we want you to restart that. This is not meant to be a permanent change, but for the time being, whole cow's milk is better than making your own formula at home. Also, for children who are closer to 1 year of age, it is okay to use the toddler formula alternatives.
But overall, breast milk is the best alternative. Sharon Buchard, a lactation consultant at Women's Hospital, says she's seen an influx of women asking about breastfeeding.
We have seen quite a few people who are interested in wanting to lactate, even though they may not have considered doing that during their pregnancy. But because of the times that we're in right now, people are more motivated to consider breastfeeding.
Buchard says relactation is also coming up.
You know, a mom has to be very committed to this, and she has to pump between 8 and 12 times a day for about 15 to 20 minutes on each breast, or they have really nice pumps out there where you can successfully empty both breasts simultaneously with double pumps. And it's doable.
But if that's not an alternative for you, Coleman Lawrence says reaching out to a hospital may help.
Some of the hospitals have a stockpile of formula which they can give to new and expectant mothers, but it's really site dependent. Of course, we always recommend breastfeeding if possible, but for some people that's just not an option. And every single site right now is different as far as the resources that they have available to them.
The Department of Health is suggesting to check food pantries and smaller stores if you can't find any formula. They also recommend switching to available brands temporarily. And they warn against watering down or mixing the formula with milk. It has been a week since the Louisiana Supreme Court threw out charges against a pastor who ignored public health restrictions on gatherings early in the coronavirus pandemic, ruling that the governor's executive orders violated freedom of religion. Reverend Tony Spell, who pastors a church in Central, said this is a tremendous win for religious civil liberties. Joining me right now is Evan Bergeron. He's a New Orleans lawyer with a broad spectrum of expertise, including First Amendment law, media law, and civil rights law. So, Evan, great to have you. Thank you for being here. The Supreme Court overturned a lower court ruling citing the fundamental importance of religious liberty. Why do they say that?
So the Supreme Court found essentially that there were too many exceptions to the governor's executive order. What the Supreme Court did was it analyzed whether this was what's called a neutral law of general applicability. Neutral meaning it doesn't target religion, and generally applicable meaning that it's applied to everybody equally. What the opinion rested on was essentially the fact that there were too many non-religious exceptions. Too much activity was allowed to go on, and so it found that it was actually hostile towards religion, and therefore that it required the highest level of constitutional scrutiny to be employed. And then when it employed that scrutiny, it essentially found that this was not the least restrictive way of accomplishing the government's means.
Now, the dissenting Chief Justice thought this actually should go back to the lower court. Why?
So this was a very interesting case procedurally in that no evidence was taken in the trial court.
No evidence?
Not at all. And in fact, that's what the Chief Justice said in his dissent was that, look, you need to go back and you need to take some evidence to first of all establish that this was actually a substantial burden on religion. The Supreme Court seems to have just assumed without deciding that this was a substantial burden on religion. And that's particularly interesting because we all know at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of churches were forced outside.
Sure.
Forced online. This particular church didn't do that, but there was no requirement in this decision to have this church demonstrate affirmatively that this was a substantial burden on their exercise of religion.
And think about when this was. This was really early on. There was no vaccine. There was no masking that people were doing. People were scrambling around at this point in time. Did the court have the benefit of hindsight in part of this decision, do you think?
It appears that that's what the court sort of based its decision on, because again, getting back to the absence of evidence in the record, what the court could have done was what's called remand, or send the case back to the trial court to make out this record, to have the government come in and say, this is what we based our decision on. This is the public health information we had at the time. This is what we knew about the virus. But it didn't do any of that. It appears also that the court didn't give any deference to the government's decision-making process, even though, and the Chief Justice mentioned this as well, this happened at the beginning of the pandemic. Right. There was so much that we didn't know. Right. And so I really do think that having the benefit of hindsight was really the basis of, one of the main bases of the court's opinion.
Now, I noticed on your website, it says, if you think your right to speak, practice your religion, gather and report news, assemble, or live and function in a society free from religion has been violated, I want to be your partner in getting justice. So you seem like the perfect person to talk to. They exercised that, didn't they? Because they felt that they'd been violated.
They absolutely did, and everybody has the right to do that. What I think, however, was missing here was, like I said, the demonstration that their fundamental right to exercise their religion was in fact burdened. And I think that was the one thing that's missing here, the one aspect of this analysis that is missing.
So where do we go from here? With this ruling, how does that change things going forward?
So it appears that this court is not really willing to give deference to government decision makers when it comes to things like public health emergencies. This kind of thing is going to plague future governors, future administrations when trying to make rules and regulations for public health and for public safety in situations where we don't know a lot about what a particular threat might bring. If I were to be governor coming up after this, I would be a little bit worried about what the court is saying.
Yeah, and you know, one thing we know that a public health emergency shouldn't be is political, though this does have political overtones again.
I agree, and unfortunately, I think regardless of the side that you're on, the fact that the pandemic has become so political is a detriment. I mean, we've seen so many people who have died over the course of these past 2 years, and a lot of it is because we've politicized the pandemic.
Right, exactly. 17,000 in Louisiana. Thank you so much for your expertise, your time. I appreciate you being here.
Sure.
Louisiana ranks second to last when it comes to recycling. In 2018, the EPA found our state's recycling rate at just over 12%. But some people in Baton Rouge and New Orleans are being creative to bolster those numbers. Franziska Troutman, the co-owner of Glass Half Full, gave Kara a tour of her growing nonprofit.
65% of the waste we generate will end up in a landfill or an incinerator. Glass makes up about 5% of that waste, which may seem small, but that equals about 110 million glass bottles going into a landfill every day. Louisiana only recycles about 12% of its waste, but there's a movement slowly brewing, one that aims to change that.
So how long have you guys been doing this? So we started in February of 2020, right before the pandemic, in a backyard. And now we're in this 40,000 square foot facility.
That's a lot of progress in a short time.
Yeah, I think it speaks to how much demand there is for glass recycling in this region and how people have waited for a long time to be able to recycle and know what's happening to their recycling.
Franziska Troutman is the co-founder of Glass Half Full, the only glass recycling facility in Louisiana.
We recycle glass in New Orleans into sand and gravel in order to use that sand and gravel for disaster relief, construction, landscaping, and ultimately coastal restoration.
In New Orleans, there isn't a way to reliably recycle glass. Curbside pickup only takes plastics, paper, cardboard, and aluminum.
So this is our glass mountain, we like to call it. So once the glass reaches our warehouse, we'll dump it into this mountain.
So none of this has to be crushed ahead of time?
No, we'll take full bottles. It's okay if it's broken. A lot of people ask if they can drop off broken glass. It's totally fine because it will be broken eventually. But yeah, we just scoop up the full bottles and then put it right into our machine. The glass will be dumped into this hopper. The hopper will send it out. It'll go up the conveyor belt where it will meet a hammer mill. So it'll be crushed up with hammers and then screened for size. So this machine is actually capable of separating out the non-glass pieces.
Glass Half Full creates different sizes of gravel, depending on the client.
This is the finest size that we make. It's like a powder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really soft.
Yeah, this feels like baby powder.
And it's sparkly.
It is, it's sparkly. Is there a specific thing that you use the green sand for?
No, again, it's just really pretty, so we like to separate the green out. Some artists like to buy the colored sand, or people use it for their gardens.
Right now, the bulk of it is being used in Pointe-au-Chien to preserve the coast.
For coastal restoration, we've been doing over a year of research with Tulane University as well as some other partners to determine the safety and the feasibility of using the sand for coastal restoration. And the research in the lab went so well that we're now transitioning to research in the environment. So we've already done a pilot project with the Pointe-au-Chien Indian tribe where we put out glass sand, and now we'll be able to monitor how the plants grow in it, how it behaves if there's a storm or just rain.
So far, they've sent out 15 tons of glass to Pointe-au-Chien, with plans of sending 15 more. But even with the efforts to repurpose glass, Louisiana still falls second to last in recycling.
So this is going to be where we do all of our LCD monitors. So we have a technician back here. This is Alicia. She does monitor testing.
Shannon Fertitta, the executive director of the Capital Area Corporate Recycling Council, says electronics are another area where recycling falls flat.
The last estimates from EPA was something around 30 to 40% of electronics is actually being recycled. I think that is a pretty generous statistic, especially in Louisiana. I think that we'd probably be 30% or less actually being recycled, but I do think that having a certified recycler here in Baton Rouge is such a valuable resource for Louisiana.
CACRC is a nonprofit that recycles computers and restores them. They're the only certified electronic recycler in the entire state.
In 2020, we recycled 660 tons. And then in 2021, it was 770 tons. So nearly 3 million pounds. we've saved from the landfill in 2 years.
Fertitta says the main struggle with recycling electronics is that people don't know you can. 1 million recycled phones can repurpose over 30,000 pounds of copper and over 700 pounds of silver.
Oh my goodness.
Look at that.
Childhood.
Look at that. Okay? Saving it from the landfill. Okay? We're going to take out those hard drives and we're going to properly recycle it.
All the hard drive data is wiped before being recycled. Then the staff here take what's left and build laptops to sell to underprivileged households.
This would be an example of one that we have sort of cleaned and repurposed. This laptop will be around $100. Windows 10 Professional, 1-year warranty. I mean, it's going to be just a great option for people on a budget.
Fertitta's given nearly 1,400 laptops to families. Louisiana has taken some strides to up its recycling rate. In 2021, the state adopted SB 97 to advance plastic recycling, though critics worry it could lead to more pollution. But people like Troutman and Fertitta say this isn't enough to make a sustainable future.
We really thought it would be a small thing. We didn't think that many people were really interested or passionate about recycling here, and clearly this is a very physical representation of how much demand there is.
Both Glass Half Full and CACRC take waste from all over the state. You can drop off your clean glass bottles to Glass Half Full on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. That's in Gentilly. And there's also drop off in Baton Rouge and curbside pickup for businesses across the state. This week we are highlighting 2 outstanding venues where you can stay fairly close to home and be enriched in art, culture, and history. In Shreveport, the RW Norton Art Gallery and Gardens, beautiful place, 2 separate exhibitions debuting on June 3rd. There's Dance, a Song of the Body. The art form is explored through public domain images and pieces from the Norton Gallery's permanent collection. Also on June 3rd, debuting, the Writing on the Wall, a tribute to European street art. This exhibition is proof that graffiti has come into its own, from canvas to concrete. Both of those exhibitions run through July 24th. Now to New Orleans and the last chance to see the 3,000-year-old tomb and artifacts of Egyptian Queen Nefertari. Susan Taylor is the director of the New Orleans Museum of Art. Susan, let me ask you first, why is this the last chance to see Queen Nefertari, one of the most powerful women in ancient civilization?
It's the last chance because after this venue that closes on July 17th, the objects will be returned to the Egyptian Museum in Turin, where they will remain permanently on display there. The museum in Turin was founded by an Italian archaeologist who actually discovered the tomb of Nefertari in Egypt in 1904. It was never before realized that such an ambitious tomb for a woman would be part of the complex and rich history of Egypt.
What do these artifacts say about the power of women in ancient Egypt?
Well, I think the artifacts show the role that Nefertari had in the court. She was not only the wife of King Ramses II, but she was his royal consort, she was the mother of his children, she was a politician and a diplomat. So this larger-than-life role that she had was completely unknown before the discovery of the tomb and the narratives that were included in the tomb.
Larger than life, that's perfect, because we are so fascinated by her history and her culture. Why do we find this queen so fascinating, so interesting?
Well, I think because we know more about her than we know about other queens because of the discovery of the tomb. We have objects from her tomb that point to the role she played, and as well as the everyday life of non-royal women. So we're able to place her into a broader context of everyday life in Egypt and to show how she stood apart from them. The tomb itself is about 6,000 square feet, which is enormous. It's the largest tomb that was ever found in the Valley of the Queen. So we have a good sense of what her role was and how important she was to this moment in time in ancient Egyptian history.
And what are some of the other things that the people will see when they go and check out this exhibit?
One of the most compelling or monumental for me is the sarcophagus lid itself, the cover of her tomb, which is in this beautiful pink granite, just massive monumental form. In addition to that, we have several mummy coffins which talk about the road to the afterlife. So you're able to see the narratives, the stories of their pasts and their journey into the afterlife, which is also told by several books of death, which are papyrus scrolls that tell Queen Nefertari and others how to make their way successfully into the afterlife, which is, after all, a journey.
A journey, yes. And also a journey to New Orleans to see this. How much longer will this be available for people to see?
It'll be on view till July 17th. And it's a quick drive from anywhere in Louisiana, and there's so many other things to see here as well. Remember, there are 1,400 restaurants in New Orleans and other new offerings. So we've just opened the Southern Jewish Museum, there's Jamnola, there are new restaurants, the Four Seasons Hotel is a new hotel that's just opened, and of course, New Orleans wouldn't be New Orleans without festivals. So
right.
Essence Fest is coming up, Satchmo Fest, and if you can't make it in time for Nefertari, there's Museum Month in August, which is a shared opportunity by the Museums of New Orleans to visit each and one of them with one membership only.
It sounds terrific. Susan Taylor, thank you so much for all the information. We appreciate it. And everyone, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB PBS app. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.